Thank you for joining me for another video. Last week, if you remember, actually the last couple of weeks, if you remember, we've been discussing the Nephilim, who were the descendants of Adam, or of Adam's tribe, I guess I should say, who ultimately left the Zagros Mountains region, which is in modern-day Kurdistan, which isn't a recognized country, but it is an historical region. This is the region of Ararat Mountains, the Ararat Mountains, and also the former kingdom of Urartu. This is in western Iran, the East Azerbaijan province, where we place the Garden of Eden. They descended from there after being exiled down into the Iranian plateau, where they settled. Some settled along the way in the Susiana plain nearby the city of Shushan, Susa. Then they migrated southwestward down to the Sumerian plain, down to the region at the head of the Persian Gulf. And this week we're picking up where we left off last week in verse 5 of Genesis 6. And we're going to read the 4 verses from verses 5 through 8. Now, it's worth noting that if you're Jewish, you know this. If you're not Jewish, maybe you don't know this. Every year, the Jewish people, we have a cycle for reading the Torah. We begin and end every year at the holiday of Simchat Torah, which just passed. And Parashat Bereshith is the very first portion that's read. And these 4 verses make up the final portion of Parashat Bereshith. So after months of doing these videos, we are finally reaching the end of the first portion that we read. So that's exciting. Andrew, that sort of thing, if you're not into that sort of thing, or maybe it's less exciting, I don't know. But that being said, if you happen to have your preferred translation of the text with you, go ahead and look at that. If not, that's fine. We'll be putting words in Hebrew on the screen. We're going to begin in verse 5. It says, Vayar Hashem Kirabarahath Adamaris, that God saw, Hashem saw, that the wickedness of man or of humanity was great in the land, or in the country would be an acceptable translation. Also on the earth would be an acceptable translation. All of them are technically correct. I prefer to interpret this one as in the land or in the country, but that's for different reasons that I'm not going to get into today. Perhaps I'll remember to get into them later on. We'll see. And so it says that, I missed some words here. It says, libo rak ra kal hayom. I skipped a line completely. That's cool. But what I just read is the rest of verse 5. So it says that, and every, it could be inclination, it could be product, it could be imagination, maybe I could see that, of the thoughts of his heart. This is of humanity's heart. It's referring to humanity as a single individual here, which the Tanakh very frequently does. Famous example would be where in Isaiah 53, where the prophet refers to Israel, corporate Israel, as a single individual, even though we were a nation, probably a couple million strong at the time. says that the inclination, the products of the thoughts of his heart were wickedness, kol hayom, all day long, every day. The idea here is kol hayom literally means all the day. The idea here is continuously. Okay, the text wants you to know that every new idea that they came up with was a really bad one. Okay, it was really it was wickedness manifest in their thoughts. Right. Verse 6: Vayinachem Hashem ki asa et ha'adam ba'aretz vayit'asev el libo. So it says that God, that Hashem, he was he regretted, or he reconsidered. Literally, it's something along the lines of he rested, or he was consoled. Perhaps even it could be an expression to say that he was inconsolable over because he made man on the earth, and it grieved him in his heart. It caused him pain in his heart. And we're going to talk about each of these verses as we go in this video. Vayomer Hashem emche et ha'adam asher barathi me'al pnei adama me'adam ad behema ad remes v'ad of hashemayim ki nichmati nihamti. It happens sometimes. I'll switch vowels around. Nihamti ki rasithim. So it says that Hashem said, I'm going to blot out, I'm going to destroy, I'm going to get rid of the man that I have created, or the humanity, this human animal that I've created, from the face of the earth, from man to behemah, to domesticated animals, to creeping things, so like snakes, bugs, probably scorpions as well, lizards, that sort of thing. Basically anything that doesn't fall under the category of bird or beast or man, that's on the land itself, would be technically, I guess, a remes. It literally means the creepy thing, the creeping thing, so like the creepy crawlies, right? And the birds of the skies, or of the heavens, because I am. So this translation says, I have reconsidered my having made them. That's the idea that it's communicating, and it is kind of a hard word to find a good translation for in this passage. It could also mean because I have relented, or because I am regretful, I guess you could say, that I've made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of Hashem. So, with that being said, let's jump into it. Okay, so there's one point that I really probably should have brought up earlier in the book. Like, let's say, during the story of Adam and Eve, or perhaps even during creation, that I'm going to bring up now because it plays a significant role in this entire flood narrative. And that is Semitic languages, Hebrew, Aramaic, Arabic, Amharic, and a number of other, in fact, probably every other Semitic language, has a feature built into it that you see to some extent in other languages that you really don't see as strong as you do in Semitic languages, and that is the use of exaggeration and hyperbole. An exaggeration, I'm just going to define these terms. Everybody knows what exaggeration is. You know, you unintentionally inflate the story a little bit, right? So, you know, there's a big rainstorm. Oh, it was a huge rainstorm. Really, was it huge? How huge was it, you know? But the idea is, you know, it was more than just a normal rainstorm. It was a huge rainstorm, right? It, from our perspective, seemed gigantic, right? Hyperbole is intentionally exaggerating for emphasis. Okay, so give you an example. Even in English, will use expressions like, so there's an English expression, it's raining cats and dogs. Okay, in Hebrew you don't say that, and I actually in English adopt the Hebrew way of saying it. Oh, it's flooding, or it's God's bringing the flood. You know, that sort of a thing. You know, the idea of a flood. Oh, well, it's a big rainstorm. Well, is it really flooding outside? No, but I'm emphasizing the magnitude of the storm. It's intentional, and it's done very knowledgeably to emphasize a very specific point of, in this case, the storm, right? So you see that a lot in all throughout the Tanakh, all throughout Jewish literature, all throughout the ages. You also see it in the Quran. You also see it in the Aramaic version of the New Testament. You also see it in you know, other Semitic languages. It just exaggerates everything to death. Okay, everything is hyperbole. You know, case in point, you know, the wickedness of mankind was only evil. It was only wickedness all day long. Okay, well, I mean, we get the idea, but it's saying something completely different in English than it does in the Hebrew. Okay, in the Hebrew, by the way, that's in verse 5. In the Hebrew, it's intentional. It's an intentional, I think it's verse 5. Yeah. So I wrote this down so that I wouldn't forget, and then I forgot, and then I realized I didn't forget. That's wonderful. So in verse 5, it says, the wickedness of humanity was great. Every product of human thoughts is wicked all day long. Okay, that's not literal. At least it shouldn't be literal. It's not intended to be literal. It is intentional hyperbole. Okay, it's intentionally exaggerating to emphasize a point. It's setting the stage for the flood. Everybody's corrupt. Everyone is corrupt. So what's the proof that it's an exaggeration? Verse 8, Noah found grace in God's eyes. Well, why would Noah find grace in God's eyes if everyone was wicked? If the product of the human heart, the product of the thoughts of the human heart, as the text says, is constantly wickedness, why did Noah find grace and Jim Bob down the street didn't? Well, you could really tell I'm from Texas. Wonderful. I know a Jim Bob. Knew a Jim Bob in high school. Also knew a Billy Bob. It's not important. This thing, that's just a general from Texas all across the South. By the way, in case you're curious, Texas is not a southern state. No, it's a western state. A southwestern state, if you want to be specific, but western state. The culture is very different from southeastern U.S. What was I even talking about? Oh, yeah. So, why did Noah find grace in God's eyes if he was just as wicked as Jim Bob down the street? Well, it's a good question. Verse 9 has the answer. It tells us that, and we didn't read that today, we're going to read it next week. It tells us, I believe it's verse 9, but don't quote me on that, it tells us that Noah was righteous. In fact, not only was he righteous, no, he was perfectly righteous. For the record, that does go against the very strict understanding. Wow, that's loud. It does go against the very strict understanding of Christian theology that everyone is a sinner, nobody is good, all have sinned. This is a direct quote from the Christian Bible. Okay, it's in the book of Romans. It says that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Okay, and if you know anything about Christianity, you know that verse, because that is a very popular verse, especially with the missionary types, right? Missionary types, like there's another type. Is there? They're like different, like are there different classes of Christians? I don't know anymore. Denominations, maybe? I don't know. Evangelical groups love that passage. You're not going to find it so much in the Catholic Church. It's not as popular among Catholics, not as popular among the Orthodox. They will use it because it's in their Bible, but you're going to find it more among the evangelical branches of Christianity. As I was saying, though, before I got sidetracked, this idea that Noah was perfectly righteous does go against a strict interpretation of that particular doctrine of Christianity. But in all fairness, most Christian groups have come up with sort of a synthesis. I don't know if synthesis is the right word. They've come up with a rationalization for it, that things were different before Jesus, and that works for them, so it works for me. Okay, and I'm not going to talk more about that today. Maybe that's the topic of another video. I don't know. Judah's views on Christianity in the Christian Bible, which I have plenty of. Some of them are very friendly to Christians. Some of them are less friendly to Christianity. That's, you know, what do you expect? I have the same thing with Islam. You know, some opinions are very favorable of any given, you know, Islamic doctrine. Some opinions are very unfavorable. I'm actually going to talk about an Islamic doctrine. I don't know how big of a doctrine it is, but I'm going to talk about it later on in this video. So, now that I am completely and totally sidetracked, let me take a peek at my notes. Yeah, so Israelites, we have a very interesting cultural quirk. We exaggerate everything. My usage of everything is in itself an exaggeration, and that was intentional, which makes it a hyperbole. Verse 5 has to be understood in that context. Is every product of the heart or of the thoughts of man's heart continually evil? Well, no. By the way, it's also important to notice that it's just the product of the thoughts of their heart and not the heart itself that's wicked. It's not, it's funny because the text actually specifically tells us not that the people were wicked. No. What was happening was wicked, and what was happening came from the thoughts of their hearts. So they, you know, maybe they had a sinful thought and decided to act on it. Does that make them inherently evil? Well, no. Does it make them inherently sinful? Well, no. I don't like doing this in videos like this, but here's just kind of a thought. There's actually a major difference between Judaism and Christianity in terms of our view of sin. In Christianity, you are sinful. You can't help it. You're born a sinner, you will die a sinner. And it's all because of Adam. Okay? Adam was created with free will. He used it to sin. And now all of humanity, which, by the way, this is not really how it works, because, as I mentioned before, not all of humanity is descended from Adam, but it's a metaphor, and I get the metaphor, I get it. And this is brought by Paul in his letters in the New Testament, that humanity is inherently sinful because Adam sinned. He transformed the nature of humanity from being just generally neutral to being generally sinful. You are a sinner. There's nothing you can do about it. Jesus is your only hope. In Judaism, we have the exact opposite opinion. You are not a sinner. You are not identified with your sin. You may have sinned, right? But that doesn't make you inherently evil. You're not inherently a sinner. You're not inherently sinful. You can, as God told Cain, you can rise above it. You can master sinfulness. And there is some loud nonsense going on behind me, outside, and that's okay with me because I'm inside. So I apologize if that's coming through in the video. Now, back to topic at hand. I'm done jumping around on differences between Judaism and Christianity in this video. What was I talking about? So a lot of the flood narrative here, it's not meant to be literal, it's exaggeration, it's hyperbole, it's part of Israelite storytelling, which is part of a broader Semitic storytelling. So it tells us, verse 6, that God regretted having created humanity, and he was grieved in his heart. He was deeply saddened in his heart. He was remorseful in his heart. So this verse employs a combination of hyperbole, blatant hyperbole, and the expression of, in Hebrew, you say, oh, he was grieved of his heart. And, did God have a heart? Well, no. Well, not in the same sense we do. I don't know. I haven't seen God. I've never done a physical examination on him. But I do know that he has no physicality. Therefore, no heart in the same sense that I have a heart, or that you have a heart, or that many people have a heart, but politicians don't. Joking. Kind of. Did God really regret making humanity? No, that's the hyperbole. He didn't regret making humanity. It's not like, we could do something and God's just going to say, oh, wow, man, I really honestly wasn't expecting that. Now I have to adjust my plan completely. I've got to go back and I've got to, back to the drawing board, as they say, right? That is not how that goes. So God's not regretting anything. It's a hyperbole, it's an exaggeration of what was going on that's meant to emphasize a point. The point being, humanity screwed up badly. In fact, that God is going to send a flood to wipe us out, right? But keep in mind, verse 8, Noah found grace in God's eyes. Okay? So, did God really, was he really remorseful for having created humanity? Was he really, did he really regret having created humanity? Well, no. No, probably not. Because, like I said, how are you going to surprise God, who knows everything, who knows every possibility? You're just not going to surprise him, so he's not going to have anything to regret. He plans accordingly. In fact, without getting into the whole predestination thing, which Judaism, today anyway, doesn't really fully accept. Some events are predestined, some are determined. That predeterminism, if I could say that, humans, we have free will. We're allowed to do whatever we want. We could choose to be on the winning side or choose to be on the not winning side, which is the losing side. I just didn't want to say that, but I'm saying it now. Aeroplane overhead. So, verse 7 shows us that God was going to send the flood because of humanity's wickedness in general. But it's worth noting that other cultures, also descended from Noah, they preserved this exact same story in their cultural memory as well, and they actually left us tablets, kind of like the Shnei Luchot, the two tablets of the Ten Commandments. Do you realize how hard it is for my brain to switch back and forth between Hebrew and English? It's crazy sometimes, man. It's not hard, it's just confusing sometimes. But so the other cultures, Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Akkadians, the Sumerians, right? They left records, so we know what they believed. Verse 7 tells us, the Torah's version, we'll call it, tells us that God was wiping out humanity because of our wickedness. You look at the other versions, and they were, they'll say things like, oh, the area was overpopulated and the gods wanted to destroy them. Oh, they were making too much noise and the gods wanted to destroy them. Okay? If you think about it, and I know it's really sort of strange to think about it like this, but bear with me here. Really, they're saying the same thing. The Torah's version and the other Mesopotamian versions of this story give really the exact same viewpoint with just slightly different emphasis, which leads to, let's call them competing, even though they weren't necessarily competing, but competing stories, narratives, that's the word. Competing narratives that are similar enough to identify as being the exact same story, but minor details are slightly different. So in the Torah, it tells us that humanity was wicked, that we'd become corrupted, and these other ones tell us that we were overpopulated, which, in case you're curious, that's another great example of exaggeration, because, I mean, come on. Really? Overpopulation in this tiny speck of land? You've got the entire world, man. There is no overpopulation. And for those people today who are concerned about overpopulation, they have clearly never been to the southwestern United States. They've clearly never been to middle of nowhere Australia, the desert portions of Australia. They've clearly never been to the lesser inhabited regions of a lot of countries. Amazon rainforest, the Chihuahua Desert, now Europe, yeah, I can see how you'd argue that's overpopulated. I get that. Stay away from Paris, stay away from London. Okay, there's a lot of people there. Amsterdam, a lot of people there. Stay away if you don't really like crowds. Right? If you don't like crowds, no, you go to Farmington, New Mexico. You go to, Elmo, Texas, which is a real town. It was about 15 minutes from my house. Just figured I'd throw that out there. You go to places where there's nobody, right? But if you think about it, you look at these big cities, they do have overcrowding issues. Okay, London, Paris, Amsterdam, what's the one in Germany? The Munich, other major cities all across Europe, New York City, LA, Calcutta, Mexico City, okay? Big cities all have one thing in common. They all have crime running rampant, okay? So if these areas are overpopulated, as some of the traditions say about the pre-flood world, if it's overpopulated, okay, so there's going to be a lot of noise, going to be a lot of crime, okay, there's going to be a lot of people crying out to whatever God they believe in, asking for justice. And so then along comes the Torah's version that says the reason for the flood was the general wickedness of humanity at that time. Why? Well, perhaps because we were, the people who lived in that area were overpopulated and crime was running rampant. Okay? Minor warning to these big cities out there. I know back in, 2004, 2005, there was a massive tsunami that struck Sri Lanka and India. Killed a lot of people. Not a good thing, in my opinion. I don't make the rules. I just kind of, laugh at them. And if God is still using nature to send divine punishment for general wickedness, general lawlessness, I think that would be a good example. I'm not saying that's what it was. Don't quote me as saying that's what it was, but that would be a good example. Hurricanes, typhoons, earthquakes, tornadoes even. Although tornadoes typically go to, lesser inhabited areas, you never really see a tornado strolling down, Broadway in New York City. You just don't see that. When I was a kid, though, there was a pretty big tornado that hit downtown Fort Worth. But to be fair, Fort Worth is not that big of a city. And the reason there are weather reasons behind that. Less people equals less buildings equals less wind resistance. Therefore, you've got tornadoes. Okay, so there are some. So the anthropogenic climate change crowd, yes, they have a point there. Okay, that's all I'm willing to give them today, but they have a point there. So all these Mesopotamian flood traditions are all saying the same thing. There was overcrowding. There was lawlessness, general wickedness. People are committing crimes. And people are crying out to their gods for help, whoever their gods may have been. And as it happens, the Torah comes along and says, well, yeah, man, God wiped out that whole area because, they were wicked, because they were overpopulated. There was crime running rampant. Cats and dogs living together. It's absolute chaos out there, right? And it just hit me that most people younger than me are probably not going to get that joke about cats and dogs living together. That's sad. Go watch Ghostbusters. Not this new garbage Ghostbusters. No, the original one, the Bill Murray one. Dan Aykroyd. Classic. Brilliant. Excellent humor. And I'm way off topic. Okay, so let's come to the final verse of today's reading. Happens to be my favorite part of the story. It should be the favorite part of the story for everyone who is, biblically minded, who believes in what the Torah is presenting to us. And that is Noah found grace in God's eyes. Well, how did he find grace? Well, I mentioned it earlier. He was righteous. Next week we're going to read that he was perfectly righteous. It's hyperbole. Was he perfectly righteous? Well, probably not. He was righteous, yes. Perfect, well, even the sages debate that. Even the sages are like, well, yeah, he was perfect in his days, but if he had lived, next door to Abraham, no, he would have been, just a regular guy. He wouldn't have been anything special. So why was Noah different? Noah, after all, the Torah very plainly tells us, was descended from Adam, which means he was a part of the Nephilim who came from Eden, down the Susiana plain, down eventually into what was the Sumerian plain. It is now in modern-day Iraq, near the Persian Gulf. Times have changed the topography a little bit. There has been a flood and a lot of other interesting things going on in that region of the world that has changed the geography a bit. So it's not quite on the coast of the Persian Gulf like it used to be, but that's okay. We work with what we got, right? So Noah, he found grace. He was part of the Nephilim, but he found grace in God's eyes. How did that happen? Well, he was righteous. He wasn't especially righteous. He wasn't like like some big time tzaddik, like Abraham. He wasn't like a saint or anything. He was probably honestly just like a regular guy like me, or you, whatever the case may be. He tried not to do bad things, and he tried to do good things, right? Like any normal, rational, reasonable human being would do. It's amazing how rationalism and reason are suffering in today's world. there are fewer and fewer of us left, it seems. But the righteousness of Noah was really just being a regular guy, it seems. Now, there are some of the other traditions, their versions of Noah have him being a priest, specifically a priest of the god Enki, who, as we discussed in a previous video, is basically an early understanding of Hashem, right? So he is a follower of Hashem. And he's more interested in spirituality than he is with carnality. You know, he's more interested in being a good guy than he is with being wicked. So, I mentioned earlier, I just remembered, and I'm glad that I remembered it, because I was just about to finish, but I just remembered that earlier I mentioned that I was going to talk a little bit about an Islamic tradition. Okay, so we have in Judaism we understand that Noah, yes, he was righteous, and his righteousness was enough that he merited to save his entire family from the flood, right? Well, in the Islamic tradition, they have a slightly different tradition. And I don't say this very often about Muslim traditions. I don't say this very often about the Quran. I don't say this very often because, you know, frankly, it's completely and totally foreign. You know, I don't say this very often about Muslim traditions, Muslim culture, Muslim understanding of things. But the Quran says that Noah, we all know Noah had 3 sons, right? Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Well, the Quran says that he had another son, and some sources say his name was Canaan, some say his name was Yam. Yam is a very interesting name because it means sea, like ocean, you know, and that ultimately describes his end. In the tradition, in the Quran, it says that Noah was on the boat, he was on the ark, right? He's shouting out to his 4th son who didn't make it on the boat, and he said, "Hey, dummy, get on the boat, you're going to drown." And he said, "Oh no, I'll be fine, I'm going to just go climb that mountain over there and I'll be safe." Then the Quran says that the waves pushed them apart and he drowned. Not Noah, but his 4th son drowned because he didn't listen to his father's righteous warning, right? So, why do I like this tradition? I don't just like this tradition, I love it because it emphasizes a point that is easy to overlook. All anyone would have had to have done to survive the flood is listen to Noah. That's all they had to do. And even though I don't believe that this tradition is true, historically speaking, it does bring up a very valid truth that I feel like we lose sight of. All anyone had to do is just listen to Noah. You just listen to the guy. Just do what he tells you. Stop being wicked. Okay, well, maybe I shouldn't be wicked. Because you'll eventually be swept away. Everyone's laughing. Sure. What's going to happen to us, Noah? Come on, ha, ha, ha. And everybody dies because they didn't listen. Even members of Noah's own family who would not have listened would have died. So, I like that tradition. I love that tradition. It's not mine. And I don't teach it because it's not mine, but I really love what it does because it opens up your mind to this entirely new possibility that there may have been people that Noah loved who died because they refused to listen. There may have been people that were members of Noah's family, his mother, his brothers, his father. Surely Noah loved them, but when he said, "Hey guys, come get on the boat with me," everyone was like, "Nah, I'm good. You go sailing, we're going to go climb a mountain or something." It's the exact opposite. The idea is, you go sailing, you go off to the water, we're going to go to the mountains. They're exact opposites, right? The idea being, you be righteous, but let us have our fun. And I really didn't want to close on that, but, I'm closing on that. I'm closing on a thought from the Quran. So, that is all I have for today. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Share it, on the social media platform of your choice, or even text messages, whatever the case may be, with other people who may enjoy this sort of thing. If you're on Facebook, that's wonderful, so am I. Come find me, just type in an unauthorized Jew, and you should be able to find me fairly easily. I leave on the fence when it pops up. And if you have questions, I love questions. I'm actually going to address a question in a couple of days, hopefully. God willing, don't quote me on that, because things do come up. But the topic that I'm going to be dealing with coming up soon is Zionism. So, if you have questions, feel free to ask. You can ask in the comments here. You can ask in the comments on Facebook. You can, if you don't want it to be known that you asked that specific question, feel free to send me a private message on Facebook. Love to hear from you. That is all I got for today. So until next time, shalom. God.